Hello and namaste everyone, and once again, welcome to my channel, The Kaur File. Every year, millions of people stay in marriages they know are over, not because they don't want out, but because they don't know how to get out, what their rights are, or what happens if they try. This isn't just a heartbreak. In far too many cases, it's a matter of life and death. Today, we are talking about something most people never think about until it's too late: divorce awareness. The laws, the warning signs, and the real documented consequences of not knowing them. So now, you may wonder why this topic matters. Divorce is often treated like a taboo subject, something people whisper about, not something they prepare for. But a lack of basic legal and emotional awareness around divorce doesn't just lead to bad breakups. Research increasingly links it to something far more serious: domestic violence and, in extreme cases, homicide. According to data compiled by domestic violence researchers, about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience some form of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And the moment someone tries to leave or file for divorce or even talk about it, that risk doesn't go down, it always spikes. That's the core problem we are unpacking today. Not knowing your options, your legal protections, or your exit plan can trap people in dangerous situations for years, sometimes permanently. Let's look at the numbers because they tell a story most people never hear. Studies tracking couples over more than a decade have found that domestic abuse is identified as a major contributing factor in roughly a quarter to nearly half of all divorces, depending on the survey and the country. About 36% of people who divorced and 48% of women specifically pointed to physical or verbal abuse as the primary reason their marriage ended. But here is the disturbing part: the danger doesn't end when someone decides to leave. Research shows that as many as two-thirds of domestic violence victims who separate from an abusive partner are re-victimized by the same partner afterward. And tragically, most intimate partner violence homicides occur after a woman has left, divorced, or simply threatened to leave her husband. In nearly half of documented murder cases of women by male partners, the act of leaving was the triggering event. See the irony of this society and the mentality of people living around here. Not only you have to adjust with an abusive partner, but also leaving them or thought about leaving them still leads to a threatening life. This is sometimes called the separation effect by researchers. The period right around filing for divorce or moving out is consistently the highest risk window for serious violence, and it's precisely the moment when people are least informed about how to protect themselves legally and physically. This is why awareness matters so much, not awareness that divorce is an option. This is what most people usually know about, but the awareness how to do it safely, what legal protections exist, and what resources are available before that dangerous window opens. This is the part of the conversation people mostly avoid, but it's the reason this video exists. Well, when someone has no awareness of their legal rights, no access to a safety plan, and no understanding of how protective orders or emergency custody arrangement works, the consequences can escalate far beyond an unhappy marriages. Researchers studying family violence have identified a pattern. In cases of involving severe controlling behavior, the sense of power and identity is often deeply tied to keeping their partner in the relationship. When that control is threatened by a divorce feeling, a conversation about separation, or even a partner quietly researching their options, some abusers escalate dramatically. Studies on family violence have even found that a significant portion of cases involving extreme harm to a partner or children occurred around moments of separation or loss of control following relationship breakdown. This isn't about scaring people away from leaving. It's the opposite. It's about making sure that when someone does decide to leave, they are not doing it blind, without a safety plan, without legal knowledge, and without support systems in place. Lack of awareness doesn't just mean someone doesn't know they can get divorced. It is so simple that everyone knows that they can get divorced. Either it is an abusive marriage or a normal marriage. It means they don't know about restraining orders, emergency shelters, confidential address programs, custody protections, or the fact that in most places help is available immediately and confidentially. There is an even darker pattern researchers have identified: cases where a spouse chooses to kill their partner rather than divorce them because, in their mind, murder felt more survivable than the social shame of a failed marriage. This is not only the loss of the couple or the loss of the spouse, it's the loss of the social integrity and the social responsibility that all the people must have. It sounds almost impossible to believe, but mental health experts who have studied these cases describe a common thread in cultures or families where divorce is treated as a personal disgrace, something that brings dishonor not just to a person but to their entire family. Some individuals come to see ending the marriage as a worse outcome than ending the relationship by force. Psychiatrists who have reviewed clusters of these cases describe them not as random acts of madness but as a preventable outcome of unchecked control, secrecy, and a culture that prioritizes marital image over a person's safety. Let me give you some examples of real life cases where some perpetrators feared social shame more than the legal consequences. Most of you already know about Meerut cement drum murder case. In 2025, India was shaken by a case from Meerut, Uttar Pradesh. A woman named Muskan Rastogi, along with her lover, murdered her husband, Saurabh Rajput, a former merchant navy officer, stabbing him, dismembering his body, and sealing it inside a cement filled drum. This case raised a deeply uncomfortable question: at what point did things go so wrong that this felt like the only way out? Whether the motive was extramarital affair, financial disputes, or the fear of what a messy public divorce would bring. What's clear is that a legal, protected path out of the marriage was never taken. This is what a complete lack of divorce awareness looks like at its most extreme, when people either don't know their legal options, don't believe those options will protect them, or feel so trapped by circumstances that violence feels more manageable than paperwork and judgment. No one should ever reach that point, and with the right awareness, legal, emotional, and social, most people don't even have to. Let me give you some more other examples. In 2018, a family in Frederick, Colorado disappeared overnight. Chris Wirtz, a seemingly ordinary husband and father, had been secretly having an affair with a coworker. When his pregnant wife, Shanann, returned home from a business trip and confronted him, he strangled her to death. He then suffocated their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, and disposed of their bodies at his oil company worksite. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant at the time. Their unborn son, Nico, never got to live. The path out was right in front of him, a divorce. He could have walked away. Instead, he chose to erase his entire family to start over with his girlfriend. Chris Watts is now serving 5 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. This is what happens when someone prioritizes their own desire to escape over the lives of the people they once promised to love. The case of Surjit Athwal. She was a 27-year-old British Indian woman, a mother of two, working as a customs officer at Heathrow Airport. She had endured years of physical abuse from her husband and controlling behavior from her mother-in-law. When she finally gathered the courage to file for divorce in 1998, her in-laws called a family meeting, not to discuss the divorce, but to plan her murder. Her mother-in-law, Kaur Athwal, told Surjit that if she attended 2 family weddings in India, the family would grant her a divorce. Surjit trusted that promise. She flew to India on the 4th of December 1998. She never came home. She was drugged, strangled, and her body was dumped in a river. It has never been found. Can you believe the reason why her family did so? Why did they kill her and dumped her body? Why? The most illogical answer is divorce would have brought shame to the Athwal family name, but the murder, the killing was never the same. In 2007, years after campaigning by Surjit's family, her husband and mother-in-law were convicted at the Old Bailey, the first ever UK conviction of an honor killing carried out abroad. Both were jailed for life. Surjit didn't lack awareness that divorce was an option. She tried. The system around her, the same culture, the family control, made sure she never got to exercise that right. Now the case of Varkha Rani. In 2013, a young woman named Varkha Rani, just 24 years old, was murdered by her husband, Jasvir Ginday, months after their lavish wedding in India attended by 700 guests. The truth was that Jasvir was gay. He had orchestrated the arranged marriage specifically to hide his sexuality from his family and community. When Varkha discovered explicit content on his devices and threatened to expose him, he killed her and then burned her body in a garden. What drove a man to commit murder? Not race, not mental illness, but shame. The fear of what his family and community would say if they found out he was gay. He had deceived everyone around him, and when the deception was about to collapse, he chose to silence the one person who could reveal it, rather than face the truth. Jasvir Ginday was sentenced to 21 years in prison. Varkha Rani was killed not by her husband's sexuality, but by the same culture that made him feel he had to hide it at any cost. If divorce, or even simply leaving, had felt like a safe, accepted option, Varkha might still be alive today. This case isn't a one-off. The same pattern repeated just 5 years later. Jessica Patel, who was 34-year-old pharmacist living in England, to the outside world, she and her husband Mitesh appeared to be a successful Indian-British couple, both pharmacists running their own business together. But behind closed doors, Mitesh had been physically and emotionally abusing Jessica for years. He controlled her, isolated her from family, and destroyed her confidence. Jessica had desperately wanted to become a mother and was undergoing IVF, not knowing that her husband has secretly been medication to suppress his fertility. The truth was that Mitesh Patel was gay. He had entered the marriage to conceal his sexuality from his family and the community. Jessica had discovered text messages between him and his male lover as far back as 2012. When the family was told, they held a meeting and instead of confronting Mitesh's deception, they blamed Jessica. 6 years later, in May 2018, Mitesh strangled Jessica to death in their home. He then staged a break into, making it look like a robbery. His plan to collect $2 million in life insurance policies he had taken out in her name and fly to Australia to start a new life with his boyfriend. The domestic homicide review into the case concluded something chilling, that Mitesh had felt the only way he could leave this marriage while preserving his honor was to kill his wife. Not divorce, not honesty, not courage, but murder. Mitesh Patel was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years. Jessica never got to be the mother she always wanted to be. This case is remarkable not just for its brutality but for what it reveals, that when shame around sexuality, divorce, and family reputation goes unchallenged, it doesn't just ruin lives, it actually ends them. In May 2026, just weeks ago as this video is being made, India was gripped by the death of Twisha Sharma. She was 33 years old, a former Miss Pune, a model, and a corporate professional. She had married Samarth Singh, a lawyer, in December 2025, just 5 months before she was found dead at her matrimonial home in Bhopal. Her family alleges she was subjected to mental harassment, financial demands, and immense pressure from her husband and mother-in-law. Her brother, an Indian Army major, has stated that Twisha called him shortly before her death, describing the unbearable situation she was living in. And here is where the story becomes about more than just one family. It becomes about all of us. Because the question being asked across India right now is this: did Twisha ask for help, and were the people around her, family, society, culture, too focused on saving the marriage to actually save her? The culture of you should adjust, compromise, endure runs deep in South Asian families. Women are told to tolerate, to be patient, that it will get better, that divorce is shameful, that what people will say. During the Supreme Court hearing on this case, India's own Solicitor General said something that every parent in this world or in the Asia needs to hear. For parents, the moral is it is better to have a divorced daughter than a dead daughter. Read that again. Better a divorced daughter than a dead one. The CBI is now investigating, arrests have been made, but no verdict can bring Twisha back. This case is still unfolding. We are not here to pass judgment before a court does, but what we can say, what the Supreme Court itself has said, is that a culture that shames divorce and silences women who ask for help is a culture that puts lives at risk. Twisha Sharma was educated, she was successful, she was loved, and still she couldn't get out. This is the cost of silence. That is why divorce awareness matters. The all cases today, what I have discussed is about the victim being failed by a system of silence, family pressure, and social stigma around divorce. Have you really noticed in our families, like in South Asian families, if you are a girl, you can relate to that. If you argue with your family, then they will start taunting you, like saying, you will surely get divorced with your husband after you marry. What lessons are we teaching you? To argue over small things, to not compromise, to not adjust, or to not tolerate? What are they teaching us? That cannot speak for your own. You cannot speak against what is right or what is wrong. You should always compromise. You should always adjust and you should always tolerate what your elders had been doing to you, because divorce is never an option. In societies where honor based thinking is strongest, researchers have found that a significant share of so called honor killings are tied to perceived shame around relationship, infidelity, or a woman seeking to leave a marriage. And in some communities, surveys have found a disturbing minority of people still believe such killings can be justified. The pattern researchers keep returning to is this: when a culture makes divorce shameful, secret, and difficult, and makes leaving feel impossible, it doesn't prevent people from leaving. It just changes how some of them try to. This is precisely why public awareness matters so much. When people understand openly and without shame that divorce is a legal and personal option, not a disgrace, it removes one of the pressure that pushes a small but real number of cases toward catastrophe. Mental health professionals studying this issue have specifically called for destigmatizing divorce as a public health strategy alongside better training for doctors and communities to recognize early warning signs like obsessive control, secrecy, and escalating possessiveness. So, why don't more people seek help or information sooner? The reasons are layered. Financial dependence is one of the biggest. Many people, especially those who have left careers to raise children, simply don't know how they would support themselves. Fear is another. Fear of retaliation, fear of losing custody, fear of being disbelieved. Shame plays a huge role too. Even now, in many communities and cultures, divorce is treated as a personal failure rather than a sometimes necessary decision. That stigma keeps people from asking questions, researching their rights, or even telling a friend what's really happening at home. And finally, simply lack of information. Most people only learn about protective orders, legal aid, or safety planning resources after a crisis, not before. By then, it's often much harder to act safely. This is where the picture gets hopeful, because awareness is something anyone can build, starting today before a crisis ever happens. Real diverse awareness means knowing a few key things in advance. First, understanding the difference between fault and no fault divorce in your country and what each requires. Second, knowing that protective or restraining orders exist specifically to create legal distance and consequences. Third, understanding that custody and child safety decisions are handled separately from the divorce itself, and that leaving does not mean losing your children. It also means building a support network early, a trusted friend, a family member, or a local domestic violence organization who knows the situation, even if no action is taken yet. Many regions have confidential hotlines specifically for this purpose, and reaching out doesn't commit anyone to a decision. It simply means having information ready before it's urgently needed. Awareness also means recognizing early warning signs in a relationship, escalating control, isolation from friends and family, monitoring of phone or finances long before things reach a crisis point. The earlier these patterns are recognized, the more options a person has. Divorce isn't a failure. Staying silent about an unsafe or unhappy marriage simply because no one ever explained the options is the real tragedy, and it's one we can change with information. If this video helped you understand something you didn't know before, share it. Someone in your life might need exactly this. Not a confrontation, not advice, just the quiet reminder that help and information exist. Help is typically free, confidential, and available right now. So don't hesitate and get help now. You are not alone in this.